You are there, on the slopes of the Guararapes hills, and the air is thick enough to drink. It is the 19th of February, 1649. The heat presses down like a physical weight, drawing sweat from your pores and mixing it with the red dust of Pernambuco. This is a land you know in your bones, its treachery, its sudden ravines, the way the sun can bake the earth into cracked pottery, and a sudden downpour can turn it into a sucking quagmire. You are one of thousands, a motley army of Luso-Brazilians, white planters, freed black soldiers under the formidable Henrique Dias, indigenous warriors led by the stoic Felipe Camarão. You are united by one thing, a burning hatred for the Dutch invaders, the cold, pale men of the West India Company, who speak a guttural tongue and worship a severe, joyless God. Just a year ago, on this very ground, you handed them a miracle. You lured their disciplined pike and shot formations into the narrow, marshy passages between the hills. Their order broke in the face of your ferocity. You fought with machetes, with cane knives, with the righteous fury of men defending their homes. You remember the shock on their faces, the way their professional soldiers, veterans of European wars, faltered and then fled before your seemingly undisciplined rage. You sent them running back to the walls of Recife, and the taste of that victory has sustained you through a year of hunger and hardship. Today, you intend to finish it. The Dutch are marching out again, a long column of blue and orange, glittering with steel. Their commander is a man named Van den Brande, and the word is that he is desperate. The company's directors in Amsterdam are losing patience. The Brazilian adventure, once a jewel of profit, has become a bleeding wound in their accounts. This is their final gamble. Break your army or abandon Nieuw Holland forever. A confidence, dangerous and sharp, runs through your ranks. You have their measure. You know their playbook. The plan is the same as before. Let them commit to the narrow defiles. Let their formations dissolve in the mud and chaos. Then descend upon them like a wrathful flood. But something is wrong. The Dutch column halts, well short of the trap. They do not advance into the bottleneck. Instead, they begin to deploy on the wider, drier plain at the foot of the hills. You see their artillery, not the light field pieces of the last battle, but heavier cannons, methodically unlimbered and aimed toward your positions. A chill, colder than any sea breeze, cuts through the humid air. Van den Brande is not repeating his predecessor's mistake. He has studied the terrain, he has read the reports, he has listened to the survivors of the first battle. He refuses to fight your fight. He is going to force you to fight his. The first cannon shot is a thunderclap that rips the world in two. It is not an inaccurate, harassing fire. It is a calculated, brutal bombardment. Iron balls tear through the trees on the slopes, splintering wood and flesh with horrifying impartiality. You see men you have known your whole life simply cease to exist, erased in a red spray. The Dutch are not aiming for individual soldiers. They are aiming for the very ground you stand on, systematically turning your advantage, the cover of the hills, into a death trap. From your vantage point, you watch as Francisco Barreto de Menezes, your commander, confers with his lieutenants. The expressions are grim. To stay is to be pulverized. To retreat is to concede the field and lose the war. The only option is the one the Dutch want: to charge, to abandon the high ground, and meet them on the plain. It is a decision born of desperation, and it is a fatal one. The cry goes up, a roar of defiance that is half prayer, half curse. You surge down the hills, a wave of humanity against a wall of iron. The Dutch do not flinch. They are arranged in the deep, seemingly invincible tercio-like formations they have perfected. This is the warfare of Europe, a mathematics of death, and you have brought only passion to face it. The first volley of musket fire is a physical blow. The air fills with a solid sheet of lead. The front ranks of your charge evaporate. You stumble over the bodies of your friends, your ears ringing, your throat choked with acrid smoke. Before you can recover, a second volley crashes out, then a third. It is a machine. The Dutch soldiers move with the clockwork precision of automatons, one rank firing while the other reloads, a relentless, rolling thunder that scythes down your men. You see Felipe Camarão and his indigenous archers trying to flank the Dutch line, but they are met by cavalry, not the clumsy, heavily armoured knights of Europe, but mounted arquebusiers who fire, retreat, and reload, peppering the warriors with shot until their charge withers away. You see Henrique Dias, a giant of a man leading his black veterans, the most disciplined troops you have, actually reach the Dutch pikes. For a moment, a sliver of impossible hope. It seems they might break through, but the Dutch lines are too deep. The pikes hold, a forest of steel, and the musketeers behind them pour fire into the trapped mass of men at point-blank range. Dias, fighting with a fury that seems superhuman, is finally brought down by a dozen shots at once. His fall breaks the heart of the rebellion. The battle becomes a rout, and the rout becomes a slaughter. This is not like the last time. There is no mercy. The Dutch cavalry, unleashed now, harry the fleeing survivors. They do not take prisoners. The West India Company has calculated the cost of clemency, the expense of prisons, the risk of future insurgency. The most cost-effective solution is extermination. You survive only by luck, by playing dead beneath a pile of the slain, the warm, sticky blood of your comrades cooling on your skin as the sun sets. When you finally rise, under the cold light of the moon, the world has been remade. The hills of Guararapes are silent, a vast, open grave. The sweet, cloying smell of blood mingles with the scent of tropical flowers. In the distance, the bonfires of the Dutch camp burn with an unnerving, orderly calm. In the days that follow, the true nature of this victory becomes clear. This was not a conquest by a king. It was a hostile takeover by a corporation. Wick soldiers, accompanied by clerks with ledgers and inkpots, spread through the countryside. The seigneurs de Engenho, the sugar barons who financed the rebellion, are not given a noble death. They are arrested as defaulting debtors. Their lands, their mills, their enslaved workers all are inventoried, valued, and seized as corporate assets to offset the costs of the pacification. There are no triumphant parades, only the cold, quiet work of auditors. The Luso-Brazilian dream of independence, of a Catholic, Portuguese-speaking nation in the tropics, is foreclosed upon. It dies not in a blaze of glory, but with the stroke of a pen on a balance sheet. You watch as the city of Recife transforms. The sound of the Catholic Mass is muted, replaced by the austere hymns of the Dutch Reformed Church, sung in stone-walled chapels. Portuguese fades from the halls of power, replaced by the clipped, commercial tones of Dutch. The easygoing, haphazard rhythm of colonial life is gone. In its place is an unyielding efficiency. The sugar mills are repaired and upgraded with new Dutch engineering. The schedules for planting, cutting, and processing are standardized. The output of sugar, the entire reason for this land's existence in the eyes of its new masters, begins to climb to unprecedented levels. This new state, Nieuw Holland, is not a kingdom or a colony in the old sense. It is a plantation, a vast, profit-driven enterprise, governed by a board of directors half a world away. Its laws are contracts, its sins are inefficiencies, and its ultimate god is the bottom line. You are no longer a subject of a distant king. You are an entry in a ledger, a human resource to be managed, a component in a machine whose only purpose is to turn the red soil of Brazil into gold for the shareholders in Amsterdam. The war is over. The insurgency is crushed. And as the first shipments of wick-branded sugar leave the port, you understand the terrible truth. You have not just been defeated, you have been acquired. The stone of the fortress wall is hot to the touch, a permanent fever baked into it by the relentless Moluccan sun. You lean against it, feeling the grit under your palms, and stare out at the Banda Sea. The water is a shade of blue so impossible it hurts the eyes. A deceptive paradise. For months, this view has been your prison and your vigil. You are a soldado, a Portuguese soldier of the Estado de India, and you are stationed at the very edge of the world, on the island of Ternate, guarding a fortune that smells of cloves. For years, the news from the West has been a slow poison. Letters from home, months out of date, spoke of defeats in Brazil, of the heretic Dutch digging into the sugarlands like ticks. Every ship that arrived seemed to have fewer supplies, fewer fresh men. The empire felt like an old man shrinking in his clothes, his power fading, his voice growing thin. You and the other men in the garrison felt it in your bones. You were the forgotten sons, left to rot in these sweltering forts, while the wealth and attention of Lisbon flowed across the Atlantic. Your armor rusts, your gunpowder is suspect, and your pay is always in arrears. You have watched the Dutch ships, sleek and fat with profit, sail just beyond the range of your cannons, their arrogance a daily insult. You know they are waiting for the rot to go deep enough, for the walls to crumble, for the last dregs of Lisbon's will to evaporate. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. 3 galleons, battered from the long voyage around Africa, limped into the harbour. They were not the usual half-empty resupply vessels. They were warships, their decks crowded with soldiers, not pale new recruits, but veterans. Men with the hard, sun-cracked faces of the African campaigns. And they brought silver. Crate after heavy crate of Spanish silver, purchased at a ruinous price in Seville, was hauled into the fortress vaults. The captain of the fleet brought the news. The final battle in Pernambuco was lost. The insurgency was annihilated. Nieuw Holland was permanent. Brazil, the land of sweet gold, was gone. A silence fell over the assembled garrison. It was the silence of an amputation. But the captain's next words cut through the despair like a cold wind. "The king has lost a limb," he declared, his voice ringing with a desperate zeal. "But he will not lose his heart. There is no more Brazil to drain the treasury. No more American adventure to siphon away the best soldiers. All that remains of the dream is here. The East, the spices. This is no longer a distant, neglected appendage of the empire. It is the empire. The order from the viceroy in Goa was simple and absolute. Hold at all costs. So when the Dutch fleet appears on the horizon this morning, 15 warships strong, the mood is not the familiar dread of the past. It is a taut, febrile intensity. The Dutch are led by a man named Meitzwicker, a merchant governor known for his ruthless efficiency. He expects to find a hollowed-out husk, a ripe fruit ready to fall. He sends a launch under a white flag, offering generous terms. Passage back to Goa for the garrison. The officers allowed to keep their swords. The offer is a formality, an insult cloaked in civility. Your commander, a grim old fidalgo who has spent 30 years in Asia, sends his reply via a single cannon shot that screams over the launch and splashes into the sea 100 yards from the flagship. There will be no negotiation. The Dutch bombardment begins. It is methodical, relentless. But it is not the overwhelming force they might have brought a few years earlier. Their best ships, their most seasoned gunners, are half a world away, protecting the sugar fleet sailing from Recife. This is a powerful expedition, But it is not the VOC at its absolute zenith. More importantly, you are ready. The silver has worked its magic. The cannons have been remounted, the walls repaired, the magazines filled with fresh powder. The men have been paid. For the first time in a decade, you feel not like a forgotten sentinel, but like a soldier in a king's army. For 3 days, the world is noise and smoke. Cannonballs smash against the ramparts, sending stone splinters flying like shrapnel. You live on hard biscuit and brackish water, your ears ringing, your body caked in sweat and grime. But your return fire is disciplined and accurate. You target their rigging, you aim for their gun decks. One of their frigates, venturing too close, takes a volley of heated shot and erupts in flames. Its death agony punctuated by the screams of burning men. Meitzwicker, seeing the futility of the bombardment, attempts a landing on the far side of the island. He wants to cut you off from your local allies and your food supplies. But here too, the new Portuguese strategy reveals itself. The veterans from the African campaigns, fighting alongside loyal Ambonese warriors, do not wait for the Dutch to establish a beachhead. They meet them in the surf, fighting with a savagery that shocks the European formations. This is not the set-piece warfare of Flanders. This is a knife fight in a mangrove swamp. The Dutch take heavy casualties and are forced back to their ships. The siege grinds on for another week, but the momentum has shifted. A tropical storm, common in these waters, damages several of the Dutch ships. Sickness, dysentery, fever is spreading through their crews. Meitzwicker is a businessman. He calculates risk and reward. The cost of taking this fortress is now too high. The potential profit is outweighed by the certain losses in men and ships. One morning, you wake to an impossible sight. The Dutch fleet, sails full, is withdrawing to the east. They are not retreating to lick their wounds and return. They are abandoning the campaign. A ragged cheer goes up from the men on the walls, but it dies quickly. The victory is real, but it feels hollow, chilling. You have held the heart of the Spice Islands, but you are still an island in a Dutch sea. You cannot compete with them commercially. You cannot outbuild them. So how do you secure this victory? The new orders that arrive from Goa a month later provide the terrifying answer. The Estado da India is over. In its place is born the Estado da Especiaria, the spice state. The new policy is not to build a trading empire, but to create a fortified cartel enforced by the sword. We cannot outsell the Dutch, so we will ensure they have nothing to buy. You are put on a ship, part of a punitive expedition. Your destination is a small nearby island whose chief has been caught selling nutmeg to an English interloper. You do not sail to negotiate or to impose a treaty. You sail to make an example. You watch as your comrades storm the village, burning houses and canoes. But that is not the true horror. The true horror is what happens next. Under the direction of a grim-faced administrator from Goa, the soldiers march to the island's sacred nutmeg, groves, trees that have been nurtured by the islanders for generations, and begin to systematically destroy them. Every tree outside the officially sanctioned Portuguese-controlled plantations is either chopped down or girdled with an axe to kill it slowly. This becomes the new reality. Portugal's presence in Asia is no longer a sprawling network of trading posts. It is a concentrated, militarized zone of control around the Spice Islands. They abandoned their less profitable forts in India and Ceylon to consolidate their forces here. The goal is no longer about spreading faith or glory. It is about controlling supply. Portuguese patrols hunt smugglers with the fanaticism of inquisitors. Local rulers are given a simple choice: sell exclusively to the Portuguese crown at a fixed price, or see your lands burn. The cartaz system, the old license to trade, becomes a weapon of economic strangulation. Any ship found in these waters without one is seized, its crew imprisoned, its captain executed. The ghost forts of the Orient are not abandoned. They are re-inhabited by a new, colder spirit. They are no longer gateways to Asia. They are the gates of a prison. You have won. You have saved the empire's heart. But in doing so, you have cut it out of the body of the world and locked it in a chest. Portugal will hold its monopoly, but it will be the monopoly of a jailer, not a merchant king. The sweet scent of cloves and nutmeg that hangs over these islands is now forever mingled with the acrid smell of fear. Your world is ruled by the ledger. The heavy, leather-bound book lies open on the mahogany desk, its columns crisp and orderly. Under the humid Gold Coast sun, light streams in through the high, barred window of your office in Fort Elmina, illuminating the dance of dust motes in the still air. Outside, you hear the rhythmic crash of the Atlantic against the stone foundations, a sound so constant it has become a form of silence. Inside, there is only the scratch of your quill. You are a boekhouder, a bookkeeper for the Geopolitics de West-Indische Compagnie, a junior factor, but a man of prospects. Your job is to account for the flow of assets. On the debit side, textiles from Leiden, iron bars, gunpowder, brandy. On the credit side, a trickle of gold dust, some ivory, and the primary commodity, the engine of this entire enterprise, listed in your ledger under the chillingly neutral term vracht cargo. Before your posting, 3 years ago, the trade was a chaotic affair, a scramble. Portuguese, English, Danish, and Coorlander ships vied for position, bribing local chieftains, often coming away with half-empty holds. The forts along this coast were precarious outposts, constantly threatened by disease and local rivalries. But that was before Nieuw Holland was secured, before the full, undivided attention of the Wick turned from conquering a continent to supplying it. Now, there is only order. The company, with the limitless sugar profits of Brazil pouring into its coffers, did what corporations do best. It optimized. It streamlined. It crushed the competition not just with cannons, but with capital. The English and the Danes are now minor tenants, paying the Wick for the privilege of trading in its shadow. The Portuguese have been driven from this coast entirely, their focus turned inward on Angola, far to the south. The Wick does not merely participate in the slave trade, it has remade it in its own image. It has created a supply chain. You see this new reality from your window. Fort Elmina is no longer just a fort, it is a corporate campus. Dutch engineers have expanded the dungeons, the Slavenkerkers, not with crude cruelty, but with calculated efficiency. They are ventilated to reduce the spread of disease. A freshwater aqueduct, a marvel of engineering, has been constructed to bring clean water from the Sweet River, reducing the incidence of dysentery. This is not humanitarianism, it is asset protection. Every enslaved person who dies before boarding is a mark in the debit column. The mortality rate in the dungeons has been reduced from 30% to a manageable 9%. Your superior, Factor General van der Waal, received a bonus from the Heren 19 in Amsterdam for this achievement. This rationalization extends to the sea. The company has commissioned a new class of vessel, the Pernambuco fleet. They are not elegant, they are not fast, but they are marvels of spatial economy. You have studied the blueprints. Every inch is accounted for. The space between decks is precisely calculated to be high enough for a person to crawl, but not to stand, maximizing the number of bodies that can be packed into the hold. The arrangement of chains, the placement of ventilation grates, the schedule for bringing the captives on deck for forced exercise. It is all codified in the Wick's Vrachtbeheer Protocol, a document you know by heart. Captains are no longer paid a simple flat fee. Their remuneration is tied to a complex formula: a base salary, a bonus for the number of units delivered, and a severe penalty for every percentage point the mortality rate during the middle passage exceeds the corporate target of 12%. The old, reckless, tight packers who gambled on stuffing their holds and hoping for the best are being driven out of business. The new WIC captain is a manager of human inventory. A ship is being loaded today. You can smell it on the breeze. The scent of unwashed bodies, fear, and the saltwater brine used to wash down the decks. You will have to go down to the docks soon to verify the manifest against the count. This is the part of the job you dislike, not for any moral qualm. The company's theologians have written extensive pamphlets proving the enterprise is not only permissible but divinely sanctioned, but because it is messy. It disrupts the clean, abstract beauty of your numbers. The numbers on your page represent a perfect, logical triangle. A ship leaves the canals of Amsterdam, carrying manufactured goods. It sells them here on the Gold Coast for human beings. Those human beings are transported to Nieuw Holland to be exchanged for sugar, the price of which is so high in Europe it feels like alchemy. The ship returns to Amsterdam laden with this white gold, its profits funding the next voyage. Orange, for the royal house that sanctions the company. Black, for the human fuel of the machine. And gold, for the sugar that sweetens the tea and coffee in every Amsterdam coffee house. The orange, black, and gold triangle. It is the most profitable business model in the history of the world. And its brutal efficiency has created an unexpected twist, a paradox you have noted in your private journals. Because the supply is now so steady, so predictable, the price of a slave in Recife has begun to fall. In the old days, a planter who bought a slave was making a significant capital investment. He might work the man hard, but he had a financial incentive to keep him alive for years. Now, with a new shipment arriving every week like clockwork, the calculus has changed. The enslaved are becoming disposable. It is now more profitable for a planter in the sugar fields of Pernambuco to work a man to death in 5 years and simply buy a replacement than to work him less intensely for 20. The WIC's efficiency in preserving life during the transit paradoxically cheapens it at the destination. The machine you help operate is so effective at supplying the cogs that it encourages them to be ground to dust. You close your ledger. It is time. You walk down from the cool stone office into the blinding sun. The courtyard is a scene of organized chaos. Company soldiers, their orange sashes bright against their blue coats, form 2 lines. Between them, a river of black bodies flows from the dungeons towards the waiting longboats. You see the branding, a fresh, raw wick on the shoulder or chest of each person, a mark of ownership as clear as any stamp on a crate of goods. You stand with the ship's purser, your manifest on a clipboard. You make your marks, counting heads, 100, 200. The purser complains about the market. The local Fonte traders, seeing the WIC's insatiable demand, have raised the price of a healthy male by 2 iron bars. It is a conversation you could be having about lumber or grain. As the last longboat pulls away toward the Pernambuco fleet anchored in the bay, you stare at its wake. That ship is a floating balance sheet. Its hold is filled with human souls. But in Amsterdam, it is already a set of numbers, traded on the bourse. Investors are buying and selling shares in its voyage. Insurers are calculating the odds of its safe arrival. You have done your part. You have balanced the books. You have converted textiles and brandy into flesh and bone, ready for the next stage of the alchemical formula that turns human misery into corporate profit. The triangle is complete. The machine turns, and the world you are building is gilded with a sweetness that tastes of ash. You feel the ship slow as it navigates the channel. and you step out from the stifling cabin into the brilliant, shocking light of the New World. After months at sea, fleeing the damp suspicions and veiled threats of Iberia, the city before you feels like a hallucination. It is Mauritsstad, the capital of Nieuw Holland, the jewel of the West India Company. It is Recife, but remade by a Dutch dream of order. Straight canals, lined with tall, narrow townhouses painted in ochre and white, cut through the tropical landscape. It is Amsterdam, miraculously transplanted to the equator and forced to coexist with mangrove swamps and coconut palms. You are a physician, a man of science, and a Sephardic Jew. In Europe, these two identities were a constant, dangerous negotiation. Your knowledge was sought by dukes and bishops, but your faith forced you to live in the shadows, always one accusation away from the dungeon. Your family in Amsterdam, who had prospered under the Dutch, wrote of a different world being built here. A place where utility trumped dogma, a place where a man's worth was measured not by his creed, but by his contribution to the great enterprise. So, you took the gamble. You packed your books, your medical instruments, and your family's secret history, and you crossed the ocean. Your first destination, even before you find your lodgings, is the street known as Rua dos Judeus, and there it island, the Kahal Kadosh Zur Israel Synagogue. It is the sight of it that breaks the last of your old world fear. It is not hidden in a back alley. It is not a secret room in a private house. It stands on a prominent corner, its facade of local stone and Dutch brick, as solid and self-assured as the Wick headquarters. Here, faith is not a conspiracy. It is a community. Inside, you find not a cowering remnant, but a thriving hub. You meet Rabbi Isaac Aboab de Fonseca, a man who in another timeline would have been forced to flee back to Amsterdam. Here, he is a pillar of the city, a scholar whose counsel is sought by the Dutch Governor-General himself. The conversation in the synagogue's courtyard is not just of the Torah, but of commodity prices, of shipping insurance, of the latest news from the sugar mills in the interior. The sacred and the profane are not separate worlds. They are woven together into the very fabric of life. This fusion becomes even clearer that evening. You are invited to a gathering at the home of a wealthy Jewish merchant, a man whose family was expelled from Spain, languished in Portugal, and has now become one of the magnates of the sugar trade. The room is a testament to this new world. Delftware tiles on the floor, Brazilian jacaranda wood furniture, silver tableware from the Potosi mines that was captured from a Spanish galleon. But it is the company that truly astonishes you. There are other Sephardim, of course, but also dour Calvinist administrators of the Wick, a German botanist in the company's employ, a French Huguenot engineer who designs water-powered mills, and even a dissident Catholic philosopher who fled the Inquisition in Goa. This is not a salon in the Parisian sense. No one is here to discuss poetry or abstract metaphysics. The conversation is about one thing: the solving of problems. The German botanist, whose name is von Clausen, is describing his experiments in crossbreeding sugarcane varieties to create a stalk that is more resistant to the borer beetle. He speaks of it as a purely scientific challenge, but everyone in the room understands the stakes. A 10% increase in beetle resistance translates directly to a 10% increase in yield, a fortune in guilders for every man in the room. The Huguenot engineer, Monsieur Dubois, counters with a presentation of his new 3-roller mill design. He has sketches, intricate drawings of gears and pressures. His design, he claims with quiet pride, can extract 17% more sucrose from the cane than the current models. He speaks of physics and mechanics, but he is truly talking about the alchemy of turning fibre into coin. You, the physician, are asked to speak, They have heard of your work in Amsterdam on fevers. The Factor General of the WIC, a man whose face is a mask of cold calculation, asks you a direct question. Doctor, the greatest drag on our productivity is the seasoning period. The mortality of new arrivals from the Gold Coast is inefficient. Yellow fever, malaria. What practical measures can be taken to reduce our initial losses? You find yourself talking about mosquito control, about the benefits of quinine, which von Clausen has begun cultivating about isolating the sick. You speak the language of medicine, of Hippocrates, but you are using it to solve a problem of industrial logistics. You are not discussing how to save lives for the sake of saving lives. You are discussing how to preserve assets, how to protect the company's investment in its vracht. The ethical dissonance is a cold knot in your stomach, but the intellectual challenge is intoxicating. These men listen. Your ideas are not dismissed because of your faith. They are valued for their potential utility. This is the nature of the Recife Enlightenment. It is a philosophical movement born not in a university but in a counting house. It is an intellectual awakening driven by the relentless, practical demands of a colossal capitalist enterprise. In Europe, thinkers like Descartes and Locke debate the nature of man, of rights, of the soul. Here, in Recife, the great minds are focused on hydrology, metallurgy, botany, and epidemiology. The goal is not to perfect man, but to perfect the system. Baruch Spinoza's family hears of the opportunities here. They send the brilliant young man not to the grinding solitude of Amsterdam, but to the vibrant intellectual hub of Recife. He still develops his philosophy of rationalism, but its test cases are not abstract geometries. They are the brutal, logical necessities of the sugar economy. His God is a God of perfect, unfeeling systems, a theology that feels right at home in a city governed by the laws of supply and demand. As the evening ends, you stand on the merchant's balcony, looking out over the moonlit city. The air is sweet, with the smell of boiling sugar from the refineries. You can hear the distant singing of the enslaved in their quarters, a sound of such profound sorrow it feels like the foundation upon which the entire city is built. In this single moment, you feel the entire paradox of your new life. You have found a freedom of thought, a respect for your knowledge, a safety for your family that you could only have dreamed of in Europe. You are part of a community that is pushing the boundaries of science and reason. But this entire gleaming edifice of logic and progress is built on a foundation of the most profound irrationality, the buying and selling of human beings. The light of the Recife Enlightenment is brilliant, but it is fueled by the darkest oil. Your intellectual liberty is underwritten by the physical bondage of hundreds of thousands. You came here seeking a rational world. It is the cold, terrifying, and exquisitely profitable rationality of a machine that has learned to value a man's mind, while seeing other men as nothing more than fuel. The ghost of Brazil haunts you. It is in the humidity that sticks your shirt to your back, a pale imitation of the suffocating heat of Pernambuco. It is in the taste of the manioc flour, coarse and bland compared to the rich fare of the sugar plantations. It is in the eyes of the other men who populate this fever-ridden port of São Paulo de Assunção de Luanda. You are all ghosts here, exiles from a lost paradise. Some, like you, are degradados, convicts sent to serve the crown in its least desirable outpost. Others are soldiers who fought and lost at Guararapes. Their pride turned to a brittle, silent anger. For decades, Angola has been a means to an end. It was a holding pen, a place to acquire the human fuel for the Brazilian sugar machine. Its rivers were highways for slavers. Its forts were warehouses for human flesh. No one wanted to be in Angola. They wanted to profit from it. But now, the machine is broken. Its engine has been seized by the Dutch. And you are all stranded on the wrong side of the Atlantic, in an empire that has suffered a phantom limb amputation. It still feels the ache of Brazil. But the limb is gone. The listlessness of this place, its air of terminal decay, shatters on a Tuesday morning in 1655. A fleet arrives from Lisbon, larger than any seen in this port for a generation. It does not carry the usual cargo of cheap wine and dispirited officials. It carries a new future. Soldiers in fresh uniforms disembark, followed by men you have never seen here before. Surveyors with tripods, engineers with rolled-up schematics, priests from stern, reformist orders, and most shocking of all, entire families, stone-faced farmers from the impoverished Alentejo region, blinking in the savage African light, their children clinging to their mothers' skirts. At their head is the new Governor-General, Salvador Correa de Sá y Benavides. In our timeline, he was the hero who recaptured Angola from the Dutch. Here, there was no Dutch conquest of Angola to reverse. His reputation was forged and then shattered in the failed Brazilian wars. He is an old man now, with eyes like chips of flint and a soul scoured by defeat. He has been sent here by a humiliated king not to manage a backwater, but to forge an anchor. He addresses the assembled colonists and soldiers in the main square, his back to the sea, as if to turn his back on the past. His voice is not loud, but it cuts through the humid air like a blade. For a century and a half, we look to the west, he proclaims, his gaze sweeping over your sunburnt, haggard faces. We found a land of ease, a land of sweetness that rotted our spirit. We grew fat and lazy while our enemies grew lean and sharp. That land is lost to us. And I say, good riddance. It was a beautiful illusion, and we have woken from the dream. Now, we build something real, something that lasts. We will not build a trading post on this continent. We will build Portugal itself, a new Alentejo, a new Trás-os-Montes. This will not be a land of merchants. It will be a land of farmers, of soldiers, of faith. Brazil made us soft. Africa will make us hard. The speech marks the beginning of a terrifying transformation. The logic is born of pure desperation. The spice trade in the East, while profitable, is a state-run monopoly. It fills the king's coffers, but it does not create a settler society, a true colony. For that, you need land, you need agriculture. You need a population that is not transient but rooted. Portugal, in its grief, turns its full, obsessive attention to the one thing it has left. Africa. The surveyors and engineers do not stay in Luanda. They march inland, protected by columns of veteran soldiers. They follow the Kwanza River not just to trade for slaves, but to map the land, to chart the soil, to identify territories for settlement. The benign neglect of the past is over. The vague Portuguese claim of sovereignty, which for so long coexisted with powerful African kingdoms like Congo and Ndongo, is replaced by a brutal and unyielding demand for direct control. You are assigned to a column pushing east, towards the highlands of Ndongo. Your objective is the old fortress at Masangano. But you do not stop there. You are no longer just raiding for slaves to be shipped away. You are clearing the land. The ethical calculus of Portuguese colonialism has undergone a chilling inversion. Before, the Mbundu people were a resource to be harvested. Now, they are an obstacle to be removed. Your campaign brings you into direct conflict with the legendary Queen Zinga of Ndongo and Matamba. She is a master of diplomacy and guerrilla warfare, a woman who has held off the Portuguese for decades by playing them against their rivals and exploiting their divided attention. But now she faces a Portugal with no other distractions. The resources once spent on a dozen fronts, Brazil, Ceylon, the Persian Gulf, are now focused like a magnifying glass on her kingdom. The war is not a series of skirmishes. It is a systematic eradication. When Nzinga's warriors melt into the bush, the Portuguese columns do not give chase. Instead, they burn the villages. They destroy the crops. They salt the fields. It is a war on the very concept of Mbundu society. You watch as entire communities are given a stark choice: submit to Portuguese rule and become labourers on the new crown estates, the prazos, or starve. The twist is in the design. This is not simply about subjugation. It is about replacement. The families from the Alentejo are settled in the newly pacified river valleys. They are given land, tools, and a contingent of African labourers who are not quite slaves in the old sense, but serfs, bound to the land they once owned. The Crown encourages marriage between the lower-ranked Portuguese soldiers and Christianized African women, but not in the fluid, syncretic way of Brazil. Here, it is a tool of assimilation, designed to create a loyal, Portuguese-speaking peasantry and erase a generation of Mbundu culture. They are trying to build a new Brazil, but with a ruthless, top-down social engineering born from the trauma of having lost the first one. You witness the final siege of Nzinga's mountain stronghold. It is a brutal, grinding affair. Portuguese engineers, using techniques learned in the Low Countries, build earthworks and batteries. Cannons, which would have been desperately needed in Recife a decade ago, are plentiful here. They pound the fortifications day and night. Nzinga and her warriors fight with a courage that borders on the mythical, but they are fighting a ghost. They are fighting the concentrated rage of a wounded empire. When the walls are finally breached, the slaughter is immense. Nzinga herself is not captured. She vanishes into the interior, a legend of resistance who will haunt the Portuguese for years, but her state is broken. Her kingdom is dismembered and turned into a patchwork of prazos. You stand, a year later, on a hill overlooking a valley that was once the heart of her power. Below you are not the sprawling, chaotic sugar fields of Brazil, but neat, orderly rows of cotton and coffee. A stone church is being built in the centre of the valley, its cross stark against the African sky. You see the Portuguese settlers, their skin tanned to leather, overseeing the African labourers. This is the new Portugal. It is orderly. It is pious. It is built on a foundation of absolute cultural destruction. In losing its sprawling, multicultural, and impossibly wealthy Atlantic empire, Portugal has turned inward. It has focused its energies on creating a smaller, poorer, but far more brutal and ideologically rigid empire in Africa. It has stopped being a global merchant and has become a continental landlord, a grim warden building a new home on the ashes of someone else's. The water in the Shottegat Bay is a placid, impossible turquoise, a stark contrast to the churning navy blue of the open sea you've just left behind. Your ship, the Sea Serpent, a leaky brigantine out of Bristol, feels shabby and out of place as you navigate the channel towards the harbour of Willemstad. You've heard the stories in the taverns of Barbados, and Tortuga whispers of a new power in the Caribbean, a force different from the ponderous, decaying might of Spain. You came seeking opportunity, a chink in the Spanish armour to exploit for a quick fortune in silver or logwood. What you have found is something far more formidable. The city that unfolds before you is a geometric fantasy. On one side of the channel, Punda, on the other, Ochre, both lined with the iconic, gabled facades of Dutch townhouses. They are painted in hues of ochre, blue and sun-bleached rose, looking as if a slice of Amsterdam has been carved out and set down under the searing Caribbean sun. This is not the filth-strewn, chaotic, free-for-all of a pirate haven. This is an organised, deliberate metropolis. The harbour is not a tangle of rogue ships, but a neatly arranged fleet of wick warships, their cannons polished and fluets, their holds heavy with goods. A pontoon bridge, a marvel of engineering, swings open with clockwork precision to let you pass. Everything here speaks of order, capital, and control. You drop anchor and are immediately boarded, not by a thuggish harbour master demanding a bribe, but by a clerk in a clean, starched collar. He inspects your papers, levies a modest, non-negotiable docking fee, and hands you a printed pamphlet outlining the port's regulations. Smuggling is permitted, he explains in a matter-of-fact tone, but it must be registered with the company for taxation purposes. Piracy is strictly forbidden. Privateering, however, is a licensed and encouraged profession. The distinction, you quickly learn, is everything. You came here from Barbados, an island that in this world is a struggling English experiment. It grows some tobacco, a little cotton, but it is starved. Starved of capital, starved of labour. The few attempts to cultivate sugar have failed miserably. The reason for that failure is anchored all around you. The Dutch West India Company, with its unshakable grip on the African Gold Coast and the endless demand from its Brazilian plantations, controls the flow of enslaved people into the Americas. They sell their surplus to the English and French, but only in small numbers and at ruinous prices. They are strangling the competition in the cradle. Why would the wick fuel the rise of a rival sugar empire when it could maintain a perfect, profitable monopoly? That evening, in a tavern where the gin is clean and the glasses are polished, you are granted an audience with a man named Mynheer van der Meer. He is not a governor or an admiral. His title is Bewindhebber, a director of the local wick chamber. He is dressed in severe black wool, an absurd choice in this heat, but it marks him as a man of power. He sips his beer and explains the philosophy of this place with the patient air of a teacher. You English, you French, you see the Spanish as a lion to be slain, he says, his Dutch accent precise. You think in terms of conquest, of planting flags. It is a wasteful medieval way of thinking. The Spanish Empire is not a lion, it is a cow. A very large, very fat cow. Why would you kill it when you can milk it every day? And that is the secret of Curaçao. This island, arid and unsuitable for plantations, has been transformed into the most efficient milking stool in history. It is a free port, a warehouse, and a naval base positioned like a dagger at the throat of the Spanish Main. Van der Meer speaks of Hugo Grotius and Mare Liberum, the freedom of the seas. It sounds like a noble, enlightened principle. But here, in the Caribbean, it has been honed into a weapon of economic warfare. It means the Dutch claim the freedom to ignore Spain's colonial monopoly, the freedom to sell European goods to Spanish colonists for a lower price, and the freedom to buy those colonists silver, cocoa, and tobacco directly, cutting out the royal tax collectors in Cartagena and Veracruz. It is a systematic bleeding. Every Dutch ship that slips into a Spanish colonial port is a leech, and when the Spanish Coast Guard tries to stop them, the Dutch Navy, the Sea Beggars, as they call themselves in a nod to their forefathers who broke the Spanish yoke in Europe, are there to enforce this freedom. They do not need to conquer Cartagena. They only need to ensure that the silver from Cartagena ends up in the vaults of the Amsterdam Bourse instead of the treasury of the King of Spain. This creates a perverse and unexpected stability. The chaotic age of buccaneers that you dreamed of has been stillborn. Why would a man like Henry Morgan risk everything to sack Panama when he can receive a Wick letter of marque, operate as a coast guard, protecting free trade, and sell his captured goods at a guaranteed price in a secure port? The Dutch have not eradicated piracy. They have professionalized it. They have turned the pirates into employees. The Jolly Roger is a poor business model when you can sail under the tricolour of the West India Company, which offers health benefits and a pension plan. You see the result of this everywhere. Rogue captains and crews, the flotsam of all nations, are drawn to Curaçao. But they are absorbed into the Dutch system. A French flibustier has his ship repaired in the Wicks dry dock, the cost of the repairs deducted from his next prize. An English privateer sells his captured Spanish indigo in the Willemstad market, where a Dutch factor grades it, sets the price, and handles its shipment to the dye houses of Europe. The Wick takes its cut at every stage. It provides the infrastructure of piracy, the banking, the insurance, the logistics, and in doing so, it tames it. Vandermeer makes you an offer. He has seen your ship, noted its speed. He has reviewed your record. You have skill. He proposes a contract. The Wick will provide you with 2 new cannons and a fresh supply of powder. Your commission will be to patrol the coast of Venezuela, protecting local traders from the tyranny of the Spanish Armada de Barlovento. Any Spanish vessels you capture are yours, minus a 30% administrative fee payable to the company. You will be a licensed privateer of the Great West India Company, a corporate raider. The choice is stark. You can refuse and try to make your own way in these seas, but you will be alone. The Spanish will hunt you as a pirate. The Dutch will see you as an unlicensed competitor, and their patrols will be as dangerous as any Spaniards. Your career will be short and likely to end at the end of a rope. Or you can sign the contract. You can become a cog in the vast, efficient machine that is bleeding the Spanish Empire dry. You will have security, profit, and a veneer of legitimacy. You look out the tavern window at the orderly harbour, at the ships flying the Wick flag. You thought you were coming to a lawless frontier. You have found something far more terrifying. A frontier where the law has been written by a corporation, and freedom is just another word for a well-drafted contract. The wild heart of the Caribbean has been tamed, not by kings or navies, but by bookkeepers and clerks. You came here to be a pirate, but the only way to survive is to become a predator in a zoo. The stench hits you first. It is not the familiar, honest smell of tar, salt fish, and mud that defines your home port of Boston. It is something else. A strange mix of wood smoke, roasting garlic, and a cloying sweetness you later identify as incense. You stand on the deck of your ketch, the Prudence, as it rounds the southern tip of the island the natives call Mannahatta. You have made this trading run to New Amsterdam a dozen times, a necessary evil to acquire the fine beaver pelts the Dutch traders here are so adept at securing from the Iroquois. But the sight that greets you as the harbour opens up makes you grip the ship's rail so hard your knuckles turn white. The flag flying over the fort is not the orange, white and blue tricolour of the States General. It is the green and white banner of the Kingdom of Portugal, emblazoned with the royal coat of arms. The city itself is a chaotic work in progress. The orderly brick-gabled houses of the Dutch are still there, but they are being altered. Balconies of dark, heavy wood are being added. Windows are being fitted with wrought-iron grills. And dominating the skyline, where the simple Dutch Reformed church once stood, a stone edifice is rising unmistakably. A Catholic cathedral, its alien arches and buttresses a scar on the horizon. You dock your vessel and step onto the wharf into a babble of unfamiliar sounds. The clipped, guttural Dutch you had learned to haggle in is almost gone, replaced by the lilting, melodic cadence of Portuguese. Dark-robed priests with tonsured heads walk among rough-looking soldiers, whose armour seems a generation out of date. The air of sober, relentless commerce you knew is gone, replaced by a mixture of pious fervour and indolent swagger. You find the man you were meant to meet, a Dutch merchant named Van Horn who chose to stay on, in a tavern that now serves rough red wine instead of beer. He is a ghost at the feast, his face a mask of sour resignation. "The Treaty of Breda," he mutters, swirling the dregs in his cup. A madness, a complete madness. He tells you the story, and it is a tale so contrary to the common sense of a Boston merchant that you can barely credit it. 2 years ago, in 1667, the great powers sat down to end their latest war. The English, he explains, were a minor party to the real negotiation. The true business was between the Dutch Republic and the Kingdom of Portugal. The West India Company, fat and lordly from its Brazilian sugar monopoly, had one persistent annoyance: the lingering Portuguese claims on the Gold Coast of Africa. Though the Wick controlled the trade, the Portuguese forts in the south, in their new Africa-focused empire, were a constant source of friction and potential competition. So the company made a proposal. They offered to trade this entire colony, New Netherland, lock, stock and barrel, to Portugal. In exchange, Portugal would formally and permanently renounce all claims to the Gold Coast, giving the Wick an absolute, undisputed monopoly on the West African slave trade from Cape Verde to the Bight of Benin. "We gave away a continent," Van Horn says, his voice thick with disgust, "for a few miles of fever, swamp, all to make the bookkeeping for their Brazilian enterprise cleaner. To the Dutch, it was a masterstroke of corporate logic. They had a surplus of land in the Americas with Nieuw Holland. New Amsterdam was a marginal asset, a fur trading post that was expensive to defend, and only modestly profitable. The Gold Coast, however, was the fountainhead of the labour that fueled their entire Brazilian fortune. Securing it completely was worth any price. For the Portuguese, humbled and cut off from the New World, the offer was a godsend. It was a chance to get back into the game, a foothold on the North American continent, a prestige project for a wounded monarchy. They renamed the city Novo Lisboa, New Lisbon. You leave the tavern and walk through the city, and you begin to see the deeper, more dangerous implications of this trade. You see a group of men disembarking from a newly arrived ship. They are pale, gaunt, and speak English with a brogue you recognize from the Irish servants in Boston. They are followed by another group, English by their dress, but they make the sign of the cross as a priest blesses them on the dock. Papists. Here, in a port that shares a border with Puritan Connecticut. This is the ethical tension, the poison pill in the heart of this deal. The Portuguese are not just building a colony, they are building a sanctuary. A royal decree from Lisbon offers land and 7 years remission from taxes to any Catholic settler who will make a new life in Novo Lisboa. It is a deliberate strategy. They know they cannot compete with the sheer numbers of English colonists. So they are seeking to undermine the English colonies from within by peeling away their disaffected Catholic minorities. You meet one of the priests, a Jesuit named Father Mateus, who is overseeing the construction of a mission just outside the city walls. He intends to convert the local Lenape tribes. He speaks to you in careful, accented English, his eyes burning with a zeal you find both impressive and deeply unsettling. "Your people trade with the savages for their furs," he says, gesturing to a group of Lenape who are watching his workmen. "You give them trinkets and guns, and you take their souls. We will give them God. We will give them civilization. We will make them subjects of the King of Portugal and children of the true church." His sincerity is absolute, and that is what makes it so terrifying. He is not offering a partnership. He is offering a loving, paternalistic annihilation of their culture. This is the unexpected twist. Novo Lisboa is not just a commercial rival. It is an ideological one. It is a Catholic thorn pressed against the side of Protestant British America. Its very existence is a challenge. That night, from the deck of your ship, you watch the lights of the city. You overhear 2 Portuguese officers talking. They speak of the French to the north, in Canada, fellow Catholics. They speak of the Spanish to the south. An old rivalry, but a shared faith. You realize you are no longer living on a continent defined by a simple English-Dutch-French rivalry. A new, powerful piece has been placed on the board. A week later, As you prepare to sail, you see it. A Portuguese frigate, its cannons gleaming, escorts a small, fast sloop out of the harbour. The sloop is flying no flag. Van Horn, who has come to see you off, nods grimly. "Guns for the Abenaki," he whispers, "to cause trouble for your people in Maine. This is the new game." The governor here is an old soldier from the Asian Wars. He does not think like a merchant. He thinks in terms of sieges and skirmishes and spies. As you sail out past Sandy Hook and turn north for Boston, you feel a profound sense of dread. The world you knew, a world of straightforward trade and Protestant self-assurance, has been irrevocably altered. You came here seeking beaver pelts. You are returning with a warning. A new front has opened in the great contest of empires and faiths. Not in the fields of Europe or the islands of the Caribbean, but here, on your very doorstep. The sleepy Dutch town is gone. In its place is a fortress of the Counter-Reformation, a base of operations for a rival power, a city that will seed conflicts on this continent for 100 years to come. You are a man of Hamburg, a city built on the cold grey waters of the Elbe, and you have come south to a city built on golden light. Lisbon. As your ship navigates the mouth of the Tagus, passing the imposing Tower of Belém, you feel you are not just entering a harbour, but a different century. Your world in the Hanseatic League is one of pragmatic contracts, of burghers who trust in ledgers more than lords. Amsterdam, which you have visited often, is a frantic hive of innovation, a city that feels as if it is being built tomorrow. London is a brawling, energetic mess, constantly tearing itself down to build something bigger. Lisbon is different. It is a city preserved in amber. The grandeur of the Terreiro do Pacho, the vast palace square that opens onto the river, is undeniable. The white stone of the palaces and government buildings glows in the afternoon sun. But it is a static grandeur. It feels completed, finished. It is the capital of a kingdom that is immensely proud of its past and profoundly suspicious of the future. You are here for the Leilão Especiaria, the great spice auction. It is the most important event on the European commercial calendar, and for a merchant house like yours, attendance is not a choice, it is a necessity. You walk through the streets towards the headquarters of the Casa da India, and the air itself seems thick with wealth. It smells of cinnamon, pepper, and cloves, a scent so pervasive and powerful that it has sunk into the very mortar of the buildings. It is the smell of a monopoly. A generation ago, the spice trade was a chaotic, violent gamble. Portuguese carracks, Dutch fleets, and English galleons fought running battles from the Sunda Strait to the English Channel. Prices in Europe were wildly volatile, subject to rumours, shipwrecks, and piracy. A merchant could make a fortune on one voyage and be ruined on the next. It was a trade for pirates and adventurers. No longer. The Portuguese, having secured their Indonesian plantations with a ring of steel and blood, recognized a fatal weakness. They had the source, but they could no longer control the seas. Their navy was a shadow of its former self, their ships old and slow compared to the newer designs of their rivals. To try and distribute the spices themselves was to invite disaster, to see their treasure bled away by 1,000 cuts. So, they made a decision of profound, conservative genius. They stopped being retailers. They became the world's sole exclusive wholesaler. You enter the grand hall of the Casa de India. It is not the frantic, shouting chaos of the Amsterdam Bourse. It is as solemn and orderly as a cathedral. Marble floors gleam underfoot. Sunlight streams through high windows, illuminating tapestries that depict Vasco da Gama's voyages. Seated on rows of polished wooden benches are the buyers. Dutchmen in severe black, Englishmen in fine wool, Genoese bankers, Venetian agents, and men like you from the free cities of Germany. You are all predators, rivals in any other context. But here, you are supplicants. A clerk, with the face of a bored aristocrat, rings a silver bell. The auction begins. An official, the provedor mor da fazenda, reads from a scroll. Lot 1, he announces in a clear, carrying voice. 500 quinties of Ceylon cinnamon of the first grade, sealed with the king's seal at Goa. The bidding is quiet, civilized. A Dutchman raises a numbered paddle. The English agent counters. It is the quiet warfare of numbers, a chess match played with the wealth of nations. The Portuguese do not care who wins. They only care about the final price, which is paid to the crown's treasurer in solid silver bullion before the goods are released from the royal warehouses. This system has utterly transformed the European economy. The speculative spice bubbles that ruined so many in our timeline never happen here. The supply is predictable. Every year the spice fleet arrives. Every year the auction is held. The amount of nutmeg, mace, cloves, and cinnamon entering the European market is a known quantity, controlled and regulated by a single seller. Prices are high, yes, but they are stable. It has taken the wild, romantic heart out of the spice trade and replaced it with the steady, predictable pulse of a machine. It has made spices less a gamble and more a utility, like timber or wool, albeit a fabulously expensive one. Your turn comes. A lot of cloves from Ambon. You have your instructions, your maximum price calculated to the last guilder. You bid against a fat, sweating man from a Marseille consortium. The price climbs. You feel the familiar thrill, the tightness in your chest. You signal your final bid. The Frenchman hesitates, shakes his head. The lot is yours. A wave of relief washes over you. Your year's profits are secured. Later that day, celebrating in a wine shop with a fellow German merchant, you reflect on the strange reality of this new world. The Portuguese are fools, your friend Heinrich declares, raising his glass. They do all the hard work, all the bloody work, and then they let us make the real money. He is right. That is the unexpected twist, the deep irony at the heart of the Lisbon auction. Portugal has made itself fabulously rich, but also completely stagnant. The crown's income is guaranteed. There is no incentive to innovate. Why build better ships when your customers bring their own? Why create new financial instruments like joint stock companies or maritime insurance when you demand payment in solid silver up front? The Portuguese have perfected the art of sitting on a treasure chest. Meanwhile, the Dutch, the English, and you, the buyers, are the ones spurred to new heights of commercial ingenuity. It is your ships that compete for the fastest, cheapest routes from Lisbon to the markets of the north. It is your bankers who devise the complex credit arrangements needed to amass the silver for the auction. It is your insurance brokers in London who pioneer the business of underwriting these massive, valuable cargoes. Portugal is the source, the wellspring. But all the economic and technological dynamism, all the capitalism that will reshape the modern world, is happening downstream. Portugal has successfully defended its 16th century monopoly by sacrificing its place in the 18th century. This truth is brought home to you by a conversation with a Portuguese nobleman you meet, a minor functionary at the court. He is draped in silks and speaks with an air of weary superiority. He boasts of the system's perfection, its order. You ask him about the source of the spices, about the whispers you've heard of the methods used to secure the monopoly in the Moluccas. His smile tightens. That is a matter for soldiers and governors, he says dismissively. A regrettable, but necessary, part of securing the king's property from thieves and smugglers. We are civilized men here. We do not concern ourselves with the husbandry. We only appreciate the harvest. The ethical tension is a chasm, deliberately unbridged. This cool, rational, orderly market in Lisbon is built on a foundation of unimaginable violence half a world away. The clean silver coins that pass from your hand to the king's treasurer are washed clean of the blood that was spilled to acquire the goods they purchase. The entire edifice of this stable, predictable global trade rests on a policy of systematic terror in the East Indies, a reality that everyone in this grand hall tacitly agrees to ignore. The scent of cloves in the air is the perfume that covers the stench of burning villages. As you prepare to leave Lisbon, you watch the harbour. You see the Portuguese carracks, magnificent and obsolete, anchored like monuments, and you see the swarm of smaller, faster, more efficient English and Dutch ships, loading the crated spices from the royal warehouses. The Portuguese have won. They have kept their treasure safe. But they have become gatekeepers to a world that is passing them by. Sellers of a key to a future they will never unlock. You are a man of two worlds, and you belong in neither. Your name is Alejandro de Vargas y Mendoza, and you carry the weight of that name in the dusty, forgotten town of Salta, nestled in the Andean foothills of the Viceroyalty of Peru. Your father was a Spanish official, your mother the daughter of a wealthy Criollo landowner. You were educated in Lima. You have read the classics and the church fathers. And you have been sent to this remote administrative outpost to learn the family business, the governance of empire. And what you have learned is that the empire is dying. It is dying of slowness. Decrees from Madrid take 2 years to arrive, by which time the crisis they were meant to address has been forgotten. It is dying of corruption. Royal officials, yourself included, are paid so little that taking bribes is not a sin but a necessity. It is dying of its own immense, ponderous weight. You are tasked with administering a territory the size of a European kingdom with a staff of 6 clerks and a dozen arthritic soldiers. But there is another world, a world you are not supposed to know exists. It lies to the east, across the vast, lawless expanse of the Gran Chaco. The border with the Dutch territory of Nieuw Holland is not a line on a map. It is a wound. From that wound bleeds a constant stream of contraband, cheap cloth, good steel tools, and ideas. Especially ideas. One evening, a merchant you know to be a smuggler gives you a gift. It is a pamphlet, poorly printed on rough paper, its ink still smelling of the press. It is written in a surprisingly eloquent Spanish. The title is El sentido común del ciudadano, the common sense of the citizen. There is no author listed, only the place of publication. Recife. You read it that night, by the light of a flickering tallow candle, and the world tilts on its axis. It does not rage against the king with the crude anger of a peasant revolt. It dismantles the very idea of monarchy with the cool, relentless logic of a watchmaker. It speaks of a social contract, of government as an instrument of the people, not their master. It describes a state where leaders are elected, where laws are passed by a council of representatives, where a man's station is determined by his industry, not his bloodline. It quotes Dutch philosophers you have never heard of, men who argue that God gave the world not to kings, but to the diligent. It calls the Spanish Empire a parasite, draining the wealth of the Americas to fund the decadent lifestyles of a distant, useless aristocracy. You know you should burn it. Possession of such a document is treason. But you read it again and again. The words give a name to the formless discontent that gnaws at your soul. For 150 years, Nieuw Holland has been evolving. It began as a corporate asset of the WIC. But corporations are not nations. The Dutch settlers, the Vrijburgers, were not content to be employees. They were Calvinists, with a deep-seated belief in their own autonomy and a historic hatred of monarchical power. They fought for and won the right to form their own councils, their own militias. A century ago, in a quiet revolution, they established the Staten-General van Nieuw Holland in Recife. They are no longer a colony. They are a sister republic to the Netherlands, a sovereign state tied by culture, language, and finance, but governing itself. The republic on the Equator, and this republic is not a passive neighbour. It is a proselytizing force. Its agents, disguised as merchants and trappers, travel the great river systems, the arteries of the continent. They do not carry weapons. They carry pamphlets like the one in your hands. They whisper in the ears of disgruntled criollos like you, men who own the land and the wealth of the New World, but are treated as second-class citizens by the Spanish-born peninsulares. They offer a vision of a new South America, a continent of free republics, trading openly with one another, unburdened by the dead hand of Madrid. An opportunity arises for you to travel to the frontier, to the mission town of Asuncion, to settle a dispute over cattle rustling. You know the rustlers are trading the cattle to the Dutch. You go not to enforce the law, but to see, to understand. From a hilltop, you look across the Paraná River. On your side, the Spanish side, is a sleepy village of mud brick houses, a decaying church, and fields tilled with wooden ploughs. On the far bank is a Dutch settlement, No Middelburg. It is a picture of terrifying order. The houses are of brick and timber, laid out in a neat grid. You can see a schoolhouse, a sawmill powered by the river, and a wharf bustling with barges being loaded with tobacco and hides. There are no grand churches, no palaces for aristocrats. There is only the architecture of commerce. It is a vision of a different future, a future that works. You meet the leader of the settlement, a man named Brandt, under a flag of truce. He is not a soldier or a nobleman. He is the elected mayor, a former merchant who speaks the language of profit and loss. He offers you a glass of gin, cool and clean. "You see, Señor Vargas," he says, gesturing to his town, "this is what men can build when they are not slaves to a king. We believe every community has the right to govern itself, to trade with whom it pleases. This is the liberty we have built, and we believe your people deserve it too." The words are a siren song, but as he speaks, you notice something. Watching you from a distance are two men. They are black, heavily muscled, and their faces are blank, exhausted masks. They wear iron collars. You look back at Brandt. "Your liberty," you say, your voice quiet. "It seems it is not for everyone." Brandt's smile does not falter. "It is the most chilling thing you have ever seen. Liberty is not a gift, Señor. It is an achievement. It is for those who are capable of it. Our republic is a republic of freeholders, of citizens, of Europeans. Our prosperity, which allows this liberty to flourish, requires a stable workforce. We have merely organized our labor on a more rational basis than your meter system in the mines of Potosi. You use economic coercion and the fiction of a wage to drive indigenous men to their deaths. We use direct ownership. It is more honest, more efficient, and there at Ireland, the ethical chasm that underpins their entire project. The unexpected, horrifying twist. They are not exporting a universal ideal of freedom. They are exporting a business model of republicanism. They want to help the criollos break free from Spain, not out of philosophical kinship, but so that the silver of Potosi and the wealth of Peru will flow to the banks of Recife and Amsterdam, not to Seville. They will help you overthrow a king, only to make you a client. Their vision of a continent of free republics is a vision of a continent of Dutch economic dependencies. The liberty they offer is the liberty of a shareholder, and it is built on the absolute denial of liberty to those they deem to be property. You return to Salter, a changed man. The pamphlet's words still ring in your ears, but they sound different now, tainted. A month later, rebellion breaks out in the highlands near Cochabamba. It is a tax revolt, a comunero uprising, but the leaders, small landowners and merchants, are using language you recognize. They are forming a junta. They are demanding representation. They are speaking of a republic. They are using the Dutch blueprint. You are ordered to lead a detachment of soldiers to help crush them. As you ride into the mountains, you see the faces of the rebels. They are men like you, criollos, fighting for a future they have only read about in contraband pamphlets. They are fighting for a dream of liberty, unaware that the dream was manufactured in Recife as a tool to enslave them to a new master. And you, a man of the dying empire, are riding to destroy them, knowing that your victory will only preserve a system you despise, while their victory would hand them over to a system whose cold, rational cruelty may be even worse. This is the true legacy of the Republic on the Equator. It has not brought enlightenment to South America. It has brought a new and more seductive form of damnation. The streams run yellow. You part the ferns with the barrel of your arquebus and stare down into the gully. It is not a trick of the light, not the reflection of the setting sun on the water. The creek bed is littered with them. Nuggets of raw gold, tumbled smooth by the water. Some as small as a grain of rice. Others, the size of your thumb. You have been walking for 5 months, a ghost in this endless green wilderness. But in this moment, the hunger, the insect bites, the fevers, they all vanish, burned away by a single, incandescent emotion. You are not a Portuguese bandeirante, a semi-mythical adventurer from Sao Paulo, driven by a lust for Indian slaves and a gambler's dream of finding El Dorado. You are something far more mundane and far more dangerous. You are an employee. Your name is Peter Jansen, and you are a geologist, a prospector in the service of the Western India Company's Department of Mineral Exploration, Recife District. Your expedition was not a haphazard quest. It was a planned, budgeted corporate initiative. For years, the company's agents on the frontier have heard stories from Tupi traders of a mountain range to the south where the rivers glittered, while the Spanish fixated on the silver mountains of Potosi, and the Portuguese, in this timeline, had turned their gaze to Africa. The WIC, with its meticulous bookkeeper's mindset, saw a gap in the market. The board of directors in Recife and their masters in Amsterdam authorized a series of systematic surveys of the interior south of the São Francisco River. It was an investment in research and development, an investment that has just paid off beyond anyone's wildest imagination. You gather a pouch full of the heaviest nuggets and begin the long, cautious journey back to the coast. You are not thinking of glory or of God. You are thinking of the terms of your contract. A fixed salary, plus a bonus calculated at 0.05% of the verified value of any new discovery. When your report and the pouch of gold arrive in Recife, they do not spark a frenzy of romantic adventurers. They trigger a board meeting. Lawyers are consulted. Engineers are summoned. The company's private military is put on high alert. This is not a gold rush. It is a resource extraction operation. Within a year, the region you stumbled upon named Goudbergen in the dry, descriptive Dutch, the Gold Mountains, is transformed. The WIC does not allow a chaotic influx of independent miners. The entire region is declared a restricted corporate zone. Access is controlled by a series of forts. The Goudbergen Line engineers, using the same skills that drained the polders of Holland, divert rivers, build sluices, and design massive water-powered stamping mills to crush the gold-bearing quartz rock. And they need labour, a vast, insatiable demand for it. The demand is met by the terrifyingly efficient machine the WIC has perfected over the last century. Fleets of Pernambuco flutes are diverted from the sugar trade and sent on express runs to Elmina. Tens of thousands of enslaved Africans, men from the Ashanti and Dahomey kingdoms, are purchased and shipped not to the cane fields, but to the mines. You stand on a hillside a year after your discovery, a wealthy man now, an advisor to the Gudbergen administration. The landscape below is a vision of hell, painted by Hieronymus Bosch and managed by a committee of accountants. Entire hillsides have been washed away by high-pressure water jets, leaving behind a raw, bleeding red earth. The rivers that once ran clear now flow thick with mud, choked with mercury, used in the amalgamation process to separate the gold. Thousands of black bodies, glistening with sweat, toil in the open pits under the watchful eyes of white overseers on horseback. The average life expectancy of a slave in the Gudbergen mines is 3 years, but it doesn't matter. The company's ledgers show that a new, healthy male from the Gold Coast costs less than the value of the gold he can produce in 2 years. The 3rd year is pure profit. The mortality rate is not a tragedy. It is a calculated operating expense. The torrent of wealth that flows from these mountains changes the world. It is a river of gold that flows directly into the vaults of the Amsterdam Bourse. It is so vast that it dwarfs the silver coming out of Spanish Potosi. The Dutch Golden Age, which in our timeline flickered and faded by the end of the 17th century, now ignites into a permanent blazing sun. The guilder does not just become the reserve currency of Europe. It becomes the only currency that matters. Kings and emperors come to Amsterdam not as equals, but as debtors. The wars of Louis XIV, the ambitions of the Habsburgs, they are all financed by Dutch banks. Their outcomes subtly steered by the turning of credit taps in a canal-side office. This endless supply of capital fuels an unprecedented explosion of Dutch art, science, and engineering. The painters of the age, a new generation following Rembrandt and Vermeer, have an endless supply of wealthy patrons. The University of Leiden, endowed with Gudbergen gold, becomes the undisputed centre of the scientific world, attracting the greatest minds from across Europe. It is here that Antony van Leeuwenhoek is given the funding to perfect his microscopes. It is here that Christian Huygens is given the resources to build the definitive astronomical observatory of his time. But this eternal golden age has a dark, unexpected consequence. It creates a deep, structural complacency. The Netherlands becomes a nation of bankers, insurers, and investors, a rentier state. With so much wealth pouring in from Nieuw Holland's sugar and gold, why would anyone in the Netherlands invest in the dirty, risky business of domestic industry? The first sparks of the Industrial Revolution, the innovations in steam, power, and textile manufacturing that began in the coalfields of England in our timeline, are smothered in their cradle here. Why build a steam engine to pump water from a mine in Limburg when you can simply buy another 1,000 slaves to dig a drainage canal in the Gudbergen? Dutch genius is focused on finance and trade, not on production. They are masters of moving wealth, not creating it. And what of Portugal? The gold of Minas Gerais was the miracle that allowed the Portuguese monarchy to recover from the loss of Brazil in our history. It funded the Baroque extravagances of King João V. It rebuilt Lisbon after the Great Earthquake. It gave the kingdom another century of relevance. Here, that miracle never comes. Their small, stable income from the spice monopoly in the East allows them to survive, but not to thrive. They remain a second-tier power, a nation of proud, impoverished noblemen and priests, watching with bitter envy as the Dutch grow ever richer on the wealth that, by a trick of geography and fate, should have been theirs. Novo Lisboa, their foothold in North America, becomes a neglected, resentful outpost, a drain on the treasury that Lisbon can ill afford. You, Peter Janssen, live out your life in a grand townhouse in Recife. You are celebrated as a hero of the company. Your portrait is painted, showing you as a stern visionary figure, pointing towards the Golden Mountains. But sometimes, at night, When the fevers return, you dream of the stream in the gully. You see the clear water running over the yellow stones. It is a memory of a pristine world, a world before you taught it the brutal alchemical equation that could turn a mountain into gold and a man into a number on a ledger. You made your nation impossibly rich, and in doing so, you may have damned its soul and frozen its future in a glittering golden stasis. The sea air hangs heavy and wet over the harbour of Recife, thick with the scent of molasses, salt, and tropical decay. It is 1807, a year the world has turned upside down. From the balcony of your counting house, you watch the fleet limp into the Bahia de Todos os Santos. These are not the familiar, broad-beamed fluets of the Wick or the swift privateers that guard the coast. This is a motley, desperate collection of ships. Dutch warships, frigates of the line, and commandeered merchant vessels, all flying the orange, white, and blue banner of the House of Orange-Nassau. They are crowded to the gunwales with people, pale-faced men, women, and children who look utterly lost under the harsh equatorial sun. This is not an invasion. It is an evacuation. You are a Grootburger of the Republic of Nieuw Holland, a descendant of one of the original Wick directors. Your family's fortune is measured not in land, but in shares of the sugar and gold trade. Your world is one of contracts, ledgers, and the cool, rational pursuit of profit. You are a Republican to your bones, raised on the stories of how your ancestors threw off the yoke of Spanish kings and then, more subtly, the corporate dominion of the Wick to forge this independent, self-governing state. The very idea of monarchy is an archaic absurdity to you, a fairy tale for the decadent, priest-ridden societies of Europe. And yet, here it is, sailing into your harbour. The news has come in fragments over the past few months, carried by fast clipper ships. A French general of monstrous ambition, a Corsican upstart named Napoleon, has conquered Europe. He has overrun the Dutch Republic, scattering its armies and installing his brother as king. He has remade the continent in his image. The legitimate government of the Netherlands, the centuries-old States General, has ceased to exist. What has arrived in your harbour is the remnant, Stadtholder William V, the Prince of Orange. His family, his court, and the entire administration of the Dutch government in exile. They did not flee to their traditional ally, England. The English, in this timeline, are a secondary naval power, their ambitions in the Caribbean and the Americas long ago checked by the Dutch. No, when the world fell apart, the House of Orange fled to the only place that had the wealth and the power to sustain them. Their fabulously rich, semi-independent sister republic in the tropics. The city of Recife, or Mauritsstad, as it is still formally known, is thrown into a state of elegant, controlled chaos. The prince and his court are installed in the old governor-general's palace, a building that for a century has served as the seat of your elected Staten General. Suddenly, the spare, business-like halls are filled with courtiers in powdered wigs and silk stockings, their European manners and intricate etiquette, a source of constant fascination and ridicule for the pragmatic merchants of your city. You are part of the welcoming committee. It is your duty to liaise with the exiled Dutch government, to arrange for their housing and finances. You meet the Prince of Orange himself. He is a portly man with sad eyes, completely overwhelmed by the disaster that has befallen his house. He speaks of tradition, of divine right, of loyalty. You listen politely, but the words are meaningless to you. Your loyalty is to your fellow shareholders, to the Republic of Nieuw Holland. Your divine right is spelled out in the charter of your family's company. This is the great unexpected consequence of Napoleon's conquest. For a brief, bizarre period in history, the capital of the global Dutch maritime empire is not in Europe. It is here, in Recife. Decisions that will affect trade in the Spice Islands, the forts on the Gold Coast, and the banks of Amsterdam are now being made in a sweltering palace on the coast of South America. The ethical tension is immediate and profound. The prince and his government in exile expect to command. They see Nieuw Holland as a colony, a possession, a source of funds for their war to reclaim their homeland. They issue decrees, they demand taxes, they try to commandeer ships and militias. Your government, the Staten-General of Nieuw Holland, has a very different view. You and your fellow Grand Burghers see the exiles as guests. Honoured guests, certainly. Family, even. But guests nonetheless. You are willing to help, but on your own terms. This is not a matter of sentiment, it is a matter of contract. You are present at the meeting in the council chamber, where this new relationship is forged. The leader of your republic, the Raad Pensionaries, a shrewd old sugar baron named Van de Gerais, lays out the terms to the prince's ministers. We recognise His Highness as the legitimate head of the House of Orange, and the symbol of the Dutch nation, he says, his voice devoid of emotion. We will finance your government. We will provide your court with a generous stipend. We will raise and equip a free Dutch legion to fight the French. However, the governance of Nieuw Holland, its armed forces, and its treasury shall remain under the exclusive control of the Staten-General. We will offer you a loan, a very substantial loan, to fund the war effort. The collateral for this loan will be the Dutch East India Company's assets in Asia. It is a breathtaking power play, cloaked in the language of legal propriety. You are not offering charity. You are executing a leveraged buyout of an empire. The exiles are horrified. They rage against the insolence of these colonials, these upstart merchants. But they have no choice. They are bankrupt, homeless, and powerless. They agree to the terms. The documents are drafted and signed. The wealth of 2 centuries, the sugar and gold of Brazil, is used to purchase the future of the Spice Islands. The West India Company, in effect, swallows its older, more prestigious sibling. This new reality creates a strange hybrid culture in Recife. The city becomes a bizarre fusion of tropical pragmatism and European pomp. On the one hand, the business of the Republic continues unabated. The slave auctions, the sugar refineries, the gold shipments, the great engine of commerce does not slow. On the other, the city now has an opera house, where bewigged courtiers sweat in their velvet coats while listening to Mozart. A royal court holds formal levees, where the old European aristocracy mingles awkwardly with the new, unimaginably wealthy republican elite of Nieuw Holland. You find yourself learning to bow, to use the correct forms of address, a skill you find as ridiculous as it is necessary. But the most significant change is happening in the minds of your people. For generations, you have lived with a kind of cultural cringe. You were the provincials, the colonials. The Hague and Amsterdam were the centre of the world. Now, you see the leaders of that world up close, and they are not giants. They are flawed, frightened men dependent on your wealth, living in your city. You realize that you are not the periphery. You are the centre. You are the source of the power. The old mother country is a failed state, a conquered territory. You are the heart of the Dutch nation, the last bastion of its language, its culture, and its capital. One evening, you stand on your balcony, looking out at the Dutch fleet in the harbour. Their lights twinkling on the dark water. They are being refitted and resupplied with your money, preparing to sail back to a war in a distant land that feels increasingly irrelevant. You realize that you no longer care if the Prince of Orange ever reclaims his throne in The Hague. The man is a symbol, a useful fiction. The real power is here, in this room, with the ledger on your desk and the contracts in your strongbox. Napoleon, in his quest to conquer the old world, has inadvertently caused the new world to inherit it. The exile of the court was meant to be a temporary refuge. You know, with a certainty that is as cold and hard as the gold in your vaults, that it is the beginning of a permanent transfer of power. The child has become the parent. The cannons of Fort Orange fire a 21-gun salute, the sound rolling flat and heavy across the humid air of Recife. It is 1822. The smoke drifts over a city transformed. The makeshift court of the exiled House of Orange is long gone, having returned to a liberated, but much diminished, Netherlands years ago. The brief, strange interlude of royal pomp is over, but it has left an indelible mark. It shattered the last vestiges of colonial deference. You are no longer a sister republic. You are simply the republic, greater in wealth, population, and power than the old country itself. You are Adrian van der Grijs, son of the Rad Pensionaris, who negotiated the great loan that saved the Dutch nation and subjugated its Eastern Empire. You have inherited your father's position, his fortune, and his cold, pragmatic worldview. Today, you are presiding over a ceremony that will once again redraw the map of the continent. Delegations from across South America have gathered in the Great Hall of the Staten General. There are lean, sun-scorched horsemen from the newly declared Platine Republic, sharp-suited merchants from the breakaway port of Montevideo, and even a handful of nervous, black-robed emissaries from the faltering Spanish Viceroyalty of Peru. They have come to Recife not as conquerors or rebels, but as petitioners. They have come for an audience with the bank. For the past decade, South America has been convulsed by wars of independence. Inspired by the North American example and fueled by the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, Criollo elites from Caracas to Buenos Aires have risen up against a weakened Spain. Figures like Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín have led armies across mountains and plains, dreaming of a united, free continent. In this world, their dream has foundered on the shoals of a terrible reality. They have the passion, the men, the desire for liberty, but they have no capital. Spain is a wreck, unable to project power, but also unable to be decisively defeated. The nascent republics are bankrupt, their armies unpaid, their territories in chaos. They look to Britain for aid, but the British are a minor player in this Atlantic. Their navy dwarfed by the Dutch, their banks lacking the deep reserves of gold that flow from the Goudbergen mines. So they come to you. Your Republic of Nieuw Holland has watched these wars with a predatory patience. You have no ideological interest in liberation. Your state was not founded on ideals of universal rights, but on the principles of a corporate charter. Your interactions with your neighbours have always been transactional. You have sold them weapons at a healthy profit, bought their contraband goods, and maintained a scrupulous, profitable neutrality. Now, the time for neutrality is over. The time for investment has arrived. The policy your government unveils today is not a declaration of war or an offer of alliance. It is a doctrine. Historians will call it the Batavian Doctrine, after the ancient tribe from which the Dutch claim descent. Its premise is simple. The Republic of Nieuw Holland will guarantee the independence of any new American state that signs a treaty of commerce and navigation with Recife. It sounds like a generous, enlightened policy. But you are a man who reads the fine print. You drafted most of it yourself. The treaty guarantees military protection. The formidable Dutch navy will prevent any European power, Spain, Portugal, or the increasingly irrelevant French from attempting to reconquer its former colonies. It guarantees financial stability. The Bank of Recife, the wealthiest financial institution in the world, will provide loans to the new governments to fund their armies, build their infrastructure, and stabilize their currencies. In exchange for this security, the signatories must agree to 3 conditions. First, they must grant Nieuw Holland preferential trade status, lowering all tariffs on Dutch goods to a nominal rate. Second, they must cede to the Bank of Recife the mineral rights to any and all undeveloped territories within their borders. Third, they must agree that any commercial disputes will be arbitrated not in their own courts, but by a Wick tribunal in Recife under Dutch commercial law. It is not a proposal for annexation, it is a proposal for receivership. You are offering to save these fledgling nations from political colonization by Spain, in exchange for their permanent economic colonization by Nieuw Holland. The first to sign is the Platine Republic, the vast territory encompassing modern-day Argentina and Uruguay. Their leader, a pragmatic general named Posadas, stands before you, his face a mixture of hope and resignation. He knows exactly what he is doing. He is trading a distant, incompetent king for a nearby, ruthlessly efficient board of directors. But his army is starving, and his revolution is failing. He has no other choice. He signs the treaty. As he does, you feel the weight of the historical moment. You are creating a new kind of empire. It is an empire with no flags, no viceroys, no occupying armies. It is an empire of contracts, debt, and commodity prices. You will not tell the Platine Republic who their president should be, but you will own the copper in their mountains. You will control the price of the grain on their pampas, and your cheap, mass-produced textiles will destroy their local weavers. Their political liberty will be a fiction, performed within the unyielding economic cage you have constructed for them. The unexpected twist is the cultural consequence of this new order. The continent does not simply divide into Spanish-speaking and Dutch-speaking blocks. It divides into two competing ideologies of modernity. In the south, in the Spanish-speaking republics, a culture of romantic, tragic nationalism develops. They have their political heroes, their poets of liberty, their gaucho myths. They define themselves by their struggle, their passion, their resistance to the cold, calculating Protestant materialism of the North. Theirs is a world of honour, faith, and chronic insolvency. In Nieuw Holland and the client states that orbit it, a different culture flourishes. It is a world of engineers, bankers, and agronomists. Progress is measured not in military victories, but in crop yields and shareholder dividends. Art is not romantic, but realistic, sober portraits of stern-faced merchants. The highest civic virtue is not honour, but creditworthiness. It is a prosperous, orderly, and spiritually arid civilization. This creates the great ethical tension that will define the continent for the next century. You are creating a stable, peaceful, and prosperous sphere of influence. Under the Batavian Doctrine, the endless bloody border wars that plague South America in our timeline are largely avoided. The economies are more stable. There is a degree of rule of law, albeit Dutch commercial law. But you have achieved this peace by denying your neighbours the one thing the revolutionaries truly fought for: sovereignty. You have given them order at the price of their autonomy. You watch as the other delegations, one by one, come forward to sign. You have broken the back of the Spanish Empire. You have secured your republic's dominance over the continent. You have done it all without firing a single shot. You have simply made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Bolivar, in his final bitter years of exile, in a timeline that will not be, will lament that he has ploughed the sea. Here, his counterparts have not even had that satisfaction. They have simply mortgaged the farm to a foreign bank. You, Adriaan van der Griese, have done more to shape the destiny of South America than any general. You have done it with a pen, a ledger, and the unshakable conviction that liberty is a luxury that only the solvent can afford. You feel the dry, crackling heat of the high veld in your bones. It is a heat that burns the moisture from the air and leaves the sky a vast, unforgiving bowl of blue. You are Afonso de Carvalho, a Sertanejo, a backcountry man, but not of the Brazilian Sertão that history remembers. You were born and raised here, in the lands beyond the Great Escarpment, in the interior of what the maps in Lisbon call the Captaincy of Mozambique. Your skin is the colour of cured leather, your Portuguese is thick with Bantu loanwords, and your faith is a practical blend of Catholic saints and the spirits your grandmother taught you to appease. Your family has been here for generations, not as traders clinging to the coast, but as preseros, holders of vast crown estates granted in the 17th century. You are the product of your empire's great trauma and its subsequent obsession. Defeated in Brazil, humbled in the global marketplace, Portugal turned inward to Africa with the single-minded focus of a monk. It did not just exploit this land, it burrowed into it. It settled it, farmed it, mapped its rivers, and slowly, brutally, assimilated its people over the course of 200 years. Today, in 1885, you are part of an expedition that is the culmination of that long, slow dream. You are a scout for a column of soldiers, surveyors, and priests marching west from the coast of Mozambique. Hundreds of miles away, another, larger column is marching east from the burgeoning colonial heartlands of Angola. Your destination is a prearranged point on the upper Zambezi River. Your mission is to link the two halves of the empire, to physically join the Atlantic and Indian Oceans under the Portuguese flag. This is the dream of the Mapa Cor-de-Rosa, the pink map. In our timeline, it was a fantastical ambition, a piece of cartographic arrogance that was brutally shut down by a British ultimatum, humiliating Portugal and revealing its weakness. But in this world, there is no British ultimatum. There is no Cecil Rhodes dreaming of a Cape to Cairo railway, because there is no mighty British Empire fueled by the profits of Caribbean sugar and North American trade. The dominant European power is the Dutch thalassocracy, a maritime empire of trade and finance, whose interest in Africa is limited to its profitable slaving forts on the Gold Coast. The British are a regional power, their colonial ambitions modest, their navy respectable, but no match for the Dutch. They have a toehold at the Cape, but their gaze is fixed on India, not the African interior. So, when your expedition sets out, the only real obstacles are the terrain and the native kingdoms that lie in your path. And 2 centuries of slow, grinding colonization have given you the tools to overcome both. Your column is not a European army struggling in an alien environment. It is an African army. The officers are Portuguese, men like you, born on the continent. But the soldiers, the cipayos, are Africans, men from assimilated tribes who have served the Portuguese crown for generations. They know the land, they are immune to the fevers, and they fight with a loyalty forged over centuries of shared history and deliberate cultural engineering. You march through lands that are not virgin territory. Portuguese missionaries and traders have been here for 100 years, their influence spreading like a slow stain along the river systems. You come upon a village, and the chief, to your surprise, greets your commander in a halting, archaic Portuguese learned from his grandfather. The local king, a descendant of the once mighty Rosvi Empire, has a treaty with the governor in Luanda. He resists your passage, not as an invader, but as a breach of contract. This is the unexpected nature of this colonization. It is not the frantic, violent scramble for Africa of our late 19th century. It is the slow, deliberate consolidation of a claim that is centuries old. The clash, when it comes, is not with a British expeditionary force, but with the forces of Msiri, the powerful king of Garanganze. Msiri is a brilliant Nyamwezi trader and warrior who has built a vast personal empire on the trade in copper and slaves. He is no stranger to Europeans. He has traded with Arabs from the east and Portuguese from the west. He sees your 2 converging columns as a threat to his monopoly. a pincer movement designed to cut him out of the great east-west trade route he controls. He marshals his army, equipped with rifles he bought from Zanzibar. The battle that follows is not a one-sided colonial slaughter. It is a hard-fought war between two established African powers, one led by a black king, the other by white Africans. You fight for weeks in the bush, a war of ambush and maneuver. But the Portuguese have two advantages Msiri cannot match. The first is artillery, light field guns that can be broken down and carried by porters, which shatter the morale of Msiri's riflemen. The second, and more decisive, is logistics. The long-established supply lines stretching back to Luanda and Mozambique mean your column is constantly resupplied with ammunition and medicine. Msiri's army, fighting on its own territory, slowly bleeds strength. In the end, his capital is taken, and he is killed in the fighting. His empire, a personal creation, dissolves with his death. The path is clear. 2 months later, on a dusty plain near the headwaters of the Zambezi, you see it. A flicker of light on the horizon. It is a heliograph, flashing a signal. It is the advance scouts of the Angolan column. A cheer goes up from your men, a raw, emotional sound that echoes across the savannah. You have done it. You have stitched the continent together. Africa é nossa. Africa is ours. The successful creation of this vast contiguous territory, this new Brazil in Africa, has profound consequences. It creates a solid block of Lusophone culture and power across the southern third of the continent. For Portugal, it is a source of immense national pride, a vindication for the loss of Brazil. The nation's entire identity becomes bound up in its African destiny. But it also creates a unique and deeply entrenched system of racial and social control. Because the colonization was so slow, so gradual, it did not rely on a stark, black and white apartheid. Instead, it created a complex, multi-layered racial hierarchy, a sociedad de castas, similar to that of Spanish America, but far more formalized. At the top are the European-born Portuguese, the Renois. Below them are the Crioulos, the white Portuguese born in Africa like you. Then a complex series of classifications for people of mixed descent, mestichos, mulattoes, and finally, at the bottom, the vast majority of the population, the unassimilated Africans, the indigenas. This is the great ethical paradox of your achievement. Portugal has built its empire not on the brutal industrial-scale racism of the later British or Belgian models, but on a more intimate, paternalistic, and in some ways more insidious system of cultural absorption and legal stratification. You have not simply conquered a people. You have created a society where the path to advancement, to personhood, is to cease to be African and become a darker shade of Portuguese. Your empire's success is predicated on a form of slow-motion cultural genocide, a project of making the African disappear not by killing him, but by turning him into a subject. As you stand with the officers from the other column, sharing a bottle of wine brought all the way from the Douro Valley, you look at the map the surveyors are already drawing. The pink stripe across Africa is no longer a dream. It is a reality. You are a pioneer, a hero of your nation. You have secured an empire that will provide the wealth and the manpower to ensure Portugal's place in the coming century. You have built a monument to your people's resilience, but it is a monument built on the foundations of a dozen erased cultures, a testament to a victory so complete, so profound, that its victims are being taught to celebrate it as their own salvation. The chiming of the carillon in the Westerkerk's bell tower marks midday. You pause, your hand resting on the brass handle of the heavy oak door, and listen. It is a sound that has measured the rhythm of this city for centuries. But today, in the year 1890, it feels different. Less a call to prayer, more the ticking of a colossal clockwork machine that runs the world. You are in Amsterdam, the undisputed financial capital of the planet, standing before the entrance to the headquarters of the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the VOC, thought to be a relic by some. But you know better. You are here to secure the final tranche of funding for your project, a project that will change the face of global transport. You are a man of vision, an engineer named Cornelis Lely. But your vision is not shared by everyone. You have spent 10 years pleading your case in the halls of power, arguing with men whose families have grown rich on the trade winds for 300 years. Your proposal is audacious. Some say blasphemous. To build a canal through the Isthmus of Kra, a narrow strip of land on the Malay Peninsula, a canal that would allow ships to bypass the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, cutting weeks off the voyage from the factories of Europe to the markets of China. In our timeline, this idea remained a dream, perpetually blocked by the British, who controlled Singapore and had no desire to see their strategic advantage eroded. But here, there is no British Singapore. The minor English trading post was bought out by the Dutch a century ago. The entire artery of the East Asian trade is a Dutch monopoly, a source of immense, almost lazy, profit. And that is your problem. The men you must persuade, the Heeren the 17 of the VOC, are not innovators. They are trustees of a vast, inherited fortune. Their company, unlike the Wick, which was absorbed into the state of Nieuw Holland, has survived as a quasi-private entity, its function now less about trade, and more about managing the vast agricultural and mineral concessions of the Dutch East Indies. They are the ultimate conservatives. Why change a system that has worked perfectly for generations? You are shown into the boardroom. The room itself is a museum. The walls are panelled with dark, heavy wood brought from Ambon, a massive map of Asia. Its coastlines traced in gold leaf covers one wall. The 17 directors sit around a table so polished you can see the distorted reflection of your own anxious face in its surface. They are old men, their faces etched with the serene arrogance of inherited wealth. They are dressed in the severe black suits that have been the uniform of Dutch power since the days of Rembrandt. You make your presentation. You unroll your schematics, your tidal charts, your cost-benefit analyses. You speak the language you think they will understand, the language of efficiency, of profit. You talk about steam. This is the heart of your argument. A new technology, the steam engine, is beginning to transform the world. Ships are no longer entirely reliant on the wind, but steam engines require coal, and coal is heavy, bulky, and must be replenished. Your canal, you argue, is not just a shortcut, it is a vital link in a new global network of steam-powered shipping, a network that requires coaling stations, deep water ports, and predictable timetables. The chairman, a Van den Broek, whose ancestor signed the order to seize the Banda Islands, listens with his eyes closed. "Mynheer Lely," he says when you have finished, his voice a dry rustle of old paper. "You speak of steam, an interesting novelty, but our fluids have sailed the winds of the monsoon for 3 centuries. They require no coal, they burn no capital, they are efficient. Your project is a gamble. The cost is enormous. Who will provide the steel, the machinery, the labour? This is the core of their resistance, the great, unexpected paradox of this world. The Netherlands, and its wider economic sphere, never had an industrial revolution, not in the way Britain did. The endless, gushing fire hose of gold and sugar profits from Nieuw Holland created a form of economic sclerosis. Dutch capital became overwhelmingly focused on finance, trade, and insurance on managing wealth, not creating it through industrial production. Why invest in a filthy, dangerous coal mine in Limburg or a noisy experimental factory in Rotterdam when you could get a guaranteed 8% return on a loan to the Platine Republic, secured by their nation's entire copper output? The Industrial Revolution is happening, but it is a scattered, fragmented affair. Small steam engines are being built in the Ruhr Valley, in Germany. A few textile mills have sprung up in the English Midlands and in the dissenting Protestant cantons of Switzerland. But these are small-scale ventures, starved for the one thing the world has in abundance, but which is locked up here, in this room. Capital. The steel, Mynheeren. You reply, your heart sinking. Will come from Germany. The engines from England. The labour we can provide from Java. You see a flicker of interest at this. Managing Javanese labour is something they understand. But the rest? Relying on foreign manufacturing? It is an affront to their sense of order. This is the ethical tension of your world. A vast global financial system, centred in Amsterdam, has been perfected. It is stable, rational, and incredibly profitable for those at its apex. But this very perfection has stifled the messy, chaotic, and ultimately transformative process of industrialization. You have a world with global banking, but not mass production. A world of intricate financial derivatives, but where the fastest way to cross an ocean is still often by the grace of the wind. Society is trapped in a gilded cage, a mercantile paradise that has prevented the birth of the industrial age. Just as the chairman is about to dismiss you, a voice speaks up from the end of the table. It is the delegate from the Bank of Recife, the representative of the Nieuw Holland interests on the board. He is a younger man, dressed in a lighter-coloured suit, his face tanned from the tropical sun. He is an outsider here, tolerated but not respected. The chairman is wise to be cautious, the man from Recife says, his accent subtly different. But my principals in Nieuw Holland see the matter differently. They are not in the business of sailing ships. They are in the business of digging holes. Gold mines in the Goudbergen, copper mines in the Andes. They understand machines. They understand steam. They have authorized me to inform you that the Bank of Recife will underwrite the entire project. We will finance the canal. In exchange, we ask for a controlling interest in the new Ochre Canal Corporation. The air in the room changes. The old men look at the man from Recife, not with disdain, but with a flicker of fear. This is a hostile takeover, disguised as a partnership. The children of the wick, the brash, pragmatic colonials, are once again asserting their dominance. They are not sentimental about the age of sail. They see the future, and it is a future of steam, steel, and debt. They will use their vast reserves of Brazilian gold to drag the old empire kicking and screaming into a new century. The chairman, trapped, has no choice but to agree. You leave the building, your plans approved, your funding secured. You should be elated, but instead you feel a sense of profound unease. You have won, but you did so by acting as the agent of a tectonic shift in global power. You look around at the city of Amsterdam, at its beautiful, ancient canals and its gabled houses. It feels, for the first time, like a museum. The engine of history is no longer here. Its boiler is being stoked with Goudbergen gold, 3,000 miles across the ocean. Your canal will be built, a marvel of the new age, and it will be a monument not to the genius of the old empire, but to its reluctant, financially coerced suicide. The canals of Amsterdam are about to be superseded by your canal at Ochre, and the world they built will be washed away by the tides of a new kind of power, a power that worships the steam engine, not the trade wind. The year is 1914. You are standing on the rain-slicked deck of a Dutch battlecruiser, the HNLMS Moritz, as it cuts through the grey, choppy waters of the North Sea. The wind whips at your oilskins, carrying the taste of salt and coal smoke. Below your feet, you can feel the rhythmic, deep-throated thrum of the massive German-built steam turbines that power this vessel. You are Captain Lieutenant Hannes de Vries of the Koninklijk Marine, and you are sailing to war. But this war is not the one we know. It is a war of bizarre angles and altered loyalties, a conflict shaped by centuries of diverted history. Your enemy is not Germany. Your most powerful, if slightly estranged, ally is not Britain. The world you must defend is a world built on Dutch capital, and its enemies rise from the vast, landlocked hearts of continents. The conflict, which the historians will call the War of the Three Leviathans, has been brewing for a generation. The first Leviathan is the one you serve, the Dutch thalassocracy. It is not a formal empire in the British sense, but a global financial and maritime network. Its heart is the dual capital of Amsterdam and Recife. Its arteries are the shipping lanes that connect the sugar and gold of southern Holland, the new, formal name for the independent state of Nieuw Holland, the spices of the East Indies, the rubber of the Congo, leased from a perpetually bankrupt Portugal, and the markets of the world. Its power is fluid, economic, and dependent on the absolute freedom of the seas. The second Leviathan is the German Reich. In this timeline, Germany's industrial revolution, while slower to start, was not constrained by a powerful, industrialized Britain. Instead, it was financed by Dutch banks. German steel, German chemicals, German engineering, they all grew to maturity, serving the needs of the Dutch global economy. But this created a deep and bitter dependency. The Germans built the machines, the ships, the engines that the Dutch used to run the world, but the profits flowed to Amsterdam. It is the resentment of a prodigiously talented engineer for his banker. Under a charismatic, aggressive Kaiser, Germany has turned its industrial might inward. It dreams of Mitteleuropa, a self-sufficient, land-based empire dominating the continent from the Rhine to the Vistula, free from the suffocating embrace of Dutch finance. The third Leviathan, and your immediate foe, is the Russian Empire. Under a succession of modernizing czars, Russia has spent the last century pushing south and east, not as a colonial power, but as a continental one. It absorbed Persia. It pushed into Afghanistan, stopping only at the borders of the Dutch-controlled East Indies. It built a vast, sprawling railway network with French and German engineering, creating an internal market that is almost entirely insulated from the maritime world. The Tsar's dream is the ancient dream of Constantinople, of controlling the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, which would give his massive land empire a warm water port and a direct challenge to the Dutch-dominated Mediterranean. The flashpoint was an assassination, just as in our world, but it was not an archduke in Sarajevo. It was a Dutch trade envoy in Constantinople, murdered by a Serbian nationalist, secretly backed by Russian intelligence. The Tsar saw an opportunity to break the financial grip of the West. Germany, seeing its chance to dominate the continent and throw off its Dutch bankers, honoured its alliance with Russia. It was a pact of the land powers against the sea power. So you find yourself here, in the North Sea, as part of the blockade fleet. Your mission is to strangle Germany, to cut off its access to the overseas resources, the rubber, the oil, the copper that it needs to wage a modern war. The British Royal Navy, in this world a smaller force primarily concerned with protecting its trade routes to India, is a junior partner in this blockade, a reversal of the roles we remember. The naval war is a strange, tense affair. The German high seas fleet is a powerful force, its ships well armoured, its gunnery excellent, but it is trapped in the Heligoland Bight, a prisoner of geography. The Grand Fleet of the Dutch Navy, a sprawling force of battleships built in Rotterdam and battlecruisers paid for with Brazilian gold, holds the exits. The fighting is sporadic but brutal. Clashes between destroyer flotillas in the dark, submarine attacks on your merchant convoys, the ever-present threat of mines. The true, unexpected horror of this war is happening far from the sea. On the Eastern Front, the German and Russian armies, two industrial giants, are locked in a struggle of unimaginable scale and ferocity. It is a war of railways and machine guns, of poison gas and heavy artillery, fought across the vast plains of Poland. The sheer, grinding mass of it consumes men and materiel at a rate the world has never seen. And this is where the third Leviathan truly comes into its own. The Republic of Southern Holland, your parent culture across the ocean, declares its neutrality. But it is a neutrality only in name. It becomes, in the words of its Rad Pensionaries, the arsenal of liberty. Its factories, newly built with the latest German and American techniques, begin producing artillery shells, rifles, and canned beef on a colossal scale. Its banks provide the limitless credit the Dutch government in The Hague needs to finance the war. The gold of the Goudbergen, which for a century fueled a golden age of peace and commerce, is now being used to underwrite the largest war in human history. You experience the ethical paradox of this new global arrangement firsthand. One day, your battlecruiser intercepts a freighter flying the flag of the Argentine Republic, attempting to run the blockade into Hamburg. You board the vessel. The captain protests vehemently, citing international law. The cargo is grain, but your intelligence officers find the bill of lading. The grain was purchased by a German front company, and the payment was guaranteed by a loan from a bank in Buenos Aires. That bank, you know, is a subsidiary of the Bank of Recife. The absurdity is staggering. Your allies in southern Holland are selling food to the client states of their economic empire, who are then selling it to your enemy. The financiers in Recife are making a profit on both sides of the transaction. When your government in The Hague lodges a furious protest, the reply from Recife is cool and legalistic. Southern Holland is a neutral nation. It cannot be held responsible for the final destination of the goods its clients trade. The sacred principle of free trade, the very foundation of the Dutch world order, cannot be suspended. You are fighting a war for a global system of capitalism, and the system itself is so pervasive, so amoral, that it insists on feeding your enemy. You are risking your life to enforce a blockade that your own allies are undermining for profit. The war grinds on for 4 years. The stalemate in the North Sea is finally broken not by a great battle, but by starvation. The blockade, despite the leaks, eventually works. Germany, cut off from the nitrates, rubber, and oil of the outside world, begins to crumble from within. Russia, bled white by millions of casualties and a series of devastating defeats at the hands of the more industrialized German army, collapses into revolution. You sail into the German port of Wilhelmshaven with the surrender commission. The German sailors are gaunt, their faces hollowed out by hunger. Their magnificent ships are paralyzed by a lack of fuel. You have won. The Dutch thalassocracy has defeated the land empires. The freedom of the seas has been preserved. But as you stand on the quarterdeck, watching the German battle flag being lowered for the last time, you feel no triumph. You feel only a vast, chilling sense of emptiness. You have just fought the most destructive war in history to protect a system of global finance. You have defeated 2 rival ideologies, Prussian militarism and Russian autocracy. But what have you defended? A world run by bankers and lawyers. A world where profit is the only true sovereign. The war to end all wars has ended, and it has ensured that the world is safe for the ledger book and the balance sheet. The light in your small apartment in Lisbon is the colour of old honey, filtered through the dust of centuries. It is 1952. From your window, you can see the rooftops of the Alfama district tumbling down towards the Tagus River. A view that has changed little in 400 years. You are an old man, a retired history professor from the University of Coimbra, and you spend your days in the quiet company of books and ghosts. Your life's work, a sprawling, unpublished manuscript, sits on your desk. Its title is Mundo em Ochre, e Azul, o Legado de Guerra Holandesa, A World in Ochre and Blue, the legacy of the Dutch War. Your world is painted in these two colours. Ochre is the colour of the sun-baked earth of your nation's vast African empire. The Estado Novo de Portugal, Alem March. It is the colour of the dust on the uniforms of the colonial soldiers who patrol the great contiguous territory from Angola to Mozambique, a source of immense pride, and a constant, draining insurgency. Blue is the colour of the sea and the sky, the colour of the Dutch. It is the colour of the flag on the supertankers that pass your coast, the colour in the logo of the Bank of Recife, which holds your nation's debt, the colour of the world's lingua franca of commerce, a clipped, precise language you were forced to learn in school. You walk through the city, and you see the legacy of that single, long-ago battle at Guararapes everywhere. You stop at a cafe. The coffee is from the Angolan highlands, a Portuguese product, but the sugar is from southern Holland, a Dutch import, cheaper and of better quality than anything your empire can produce. You read the newspaper. The front page celebrates the 50th anniversary of the completion of the Ferrovia Transafricana, the great railway linking Luanda and Lourenço Marques, a triumph of Portuguese engineering. On the financial page, an article notes, with the usual weary resignation, that the interest payment on the Dutch loans used to build that very railway is coming due. Your world never had the great ideological clashes of the 20th century as we knew them. There was no global contest between fascism, communism, and liberal democracy. The War of the Three Leviathans was a war between different models of managing capital. The victorious Dutch thalassocracy did not impose a political system on the defeated. It imposed a financial one. Germany was not dismembered or occupied. It was simply forced back into the Dutch economic orbit, its industries rebuilt with loans from Amsterdam, its ambitions neutered by debt. The Russian Empire shattered, not into a single communist state, but into a dozen warring republics, all of whom now compete for development loans from the Bank of Recife. The result is a world that is technologically advanced, but politically archaic. The great scientific leaps of the mid-20th century have happened. There is aviation, radio, a burgeoning understanding of the atom. But these innovations are controlled by vast corporate consortiums, chartered in Amsterdam or Recife. They are tools of commerce, not instruments of national prestige or ideological competition. Political development, without the crucible of fascism or communism, has stagnated. Most of the world is a patchwork of constitutional monarchies, military juntas, and mercantile republics, all locked into the same global economic system. The great question is not, what is the best way to live? But, what is the most profitable way to organize society? You see this most clearly in the food. You visit the vibrant Mercado da Ribeira. You see a stall selling spices. Cloves, nutmeg, mace, they are not expensive luxuries. They are commonplaces, sold by the scoop from huge burlap sacks. For 300 years, the Portuguese spice monopoly made them a steady, reliable commodity. They found their way into the kitchens of the world, not as exotic treasures, but as everyday flavours. Your own national dish, a stew served over rice, is heavy with cloves, a taste that connects you directly to the brutal history of the Moluccas. An unexpected culinary legacy. But the most profound legacy, the testament to that long-ago divergence, lies half a world away. You switch on your expensive Dutch-made radio. After a moment of static, you find a broadcast from Radio Mauritsstad, the official voice of the Republic of Southern Holland. It is a musical program. The sound that fills your small room is a strange and beautiful hybrid. It is the sound of a Calvinist hymn, its stern, logical melody, unmistakable, but it is played on African drums and a stringed instrument that sounds vaguely like a Portuguese guitar. A choir sings in Dutch, but with a syncopation, a sense of rhythm that is utterly alien to the flatlands of Europe. This is the sound of the dominant cultural power on the planet. The Republic of Southern Holland, a nation forged in the crucible of corporate slavery, Protestant republicanism, and tropical syncretism. It is a nation that is both deeply conservative and radically modern. Its society is rigidly stratified by race and class, a legacy of its plantation origins. But it is also a hub of scientific and technological innovation, its universities and corporate labs driving the world's progress. It is a beacon of anti-monarchical republican sentiment, yet its own society is one of the most hierarchical on Earth. This is the great paradox, the ethical core of your unpublished book. The victory of the Dutch at Guararapes, the survival of Nieuw Holland, created a world that is, in many ways, more stable and more prosperous than the one that might have been. There were no world wars on the scale we knew, no Holocaust, no Cold War nuclear standoff. The world is run with the ruthless, immoral efficiency of a corporation. The bottom line is peace and profit. But this stability has come at a terrible price. The concepts of universal human rights, of self-determination for all peoples, of the intrinsic worth of a culture outside of its economic utility, these ideas, born in the revolutionary fires of our timeline, have never truly taken root. It is a world without the great isms that caused so much destruction, but also without the great dreams of universal emancipation that they, in their own twisted ways, represented. It is a world managed, not inspired. You look down at your manuscript, at the two words on the title page, Ochre e Azul. Ochre, the colour of your people's stubborn, earthbound, and ultimately tragic African dream, and blue, the colour of the cold, rational, and terrifyingly successful Dutch sea. The world you live in is a painting made of only these two colours. It is a masterpiece of order, but you cannot help but wonder about all the other colours that were never allowed onto the canvas. So, the film reel flickers and dies. We are left in the quiet dark, with the ghost of a world that never was. Two paths diverged in a swampy Brazilian wood. One led to our time, a history of explosive, chaotic revolutions, industrial, political, and social. It was a history written in fire, fueled by the competing fever dreams of ideology, producing both the incandescent promise of universal rights and the bottomless depravity of the death camp. The other path, the one we walked, led to a world written in ink. It was a history of contracts, of ledgers, of a rational, managed order. It was a world spared the spectre of Auschwitz and the Gulag, a world that never had to stare into the abyss of total ideological war. The War of the Three Leviathans was, in the end, less a clash of civilizations than a hostile corporate takeover. But what was the price of this peace? This stability? The world that traded the divine right of kings for the contractual obligation of a corporate charter also traded the unruly, dangerous belief in the divine right of every human soul. The notion that a person possesses an inherent dignity, separate from their economic utility or their place in a rigid social hierarchy, was a heresy that never found its profit. This alternate timeline traded the 20th century's cataclysms for a quieter, more pervasive, and perhaps more permanent form of damnation. The cold, unyielding logic of the balance sheet applied to the human spirit. It poses a chilling question. Is a world without our greatest horrors a better world, if it is also a world where our greatest hopes would be stillborn?